So let's bring into the conversation special correspondent at Vanity Fair and the host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast. Molly, in your latest piece, you discuss how Trump 2024, his campaign, is the polar opposite of the one that got him the White House in 2016. And you write in part, much to the collective horror of the Republican donor class and all decent people everywhere, Trump is still very much in the game. Despite the recommendations from the bipartisan January 6th committee, Trump isn't barred from running for office after inciting an insurrection. While former Trump Organization CFO Allen Weisselberg and many stormed the U.S. Capitol on Trump's behalf have faced jail time, the former president hasn't been indicted yet. You continue. Trump is going to try and pretend he's not the subject of multiple criminal investigations and civil lawsuits. He'll probably stick to more conventional campaign stops as opposed to using his usual NASCAR campaign rallies teeming with boomer MAGA heads who travel around in F Your Feelings t-shirts. Luckily for Trump, the mainstream media has a bias toward normalcy. So the guy who is responsible for eroding democracy, being found to be the single largest driver of COVID disinformation, and ultimately ending his reign with a failed coup attempt, gets treated the same as Jeb Bush? Please clap. Trump's banking on the old Gore-Vidal adage. We are the United States of amnesia. We learn nothing because we remember nothing.
Well, here's a couple things to remember. Number one, for Republicans, Molly, Donald Trump is a guy that told staff members that Mike Pence deserved to be hanged on January the 6th.
There's too many things to remember.
Donald Trump is the guy that wrote on his own social platform that the United States Constitution needed to be, quote, terminated. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is the same guy who sat and stared at the riots while his children, his friends, and every one of his staff members in the White House begged him to stop it. And he did nothing. Some things here pretty hard to forget.
I think there's a bias towards normalcy in mainstream reporting, and so it ends up being very tough to put all those caveats in when you're just writing about a campaign stop. And so I think that Trump is going to try to use that as much as possible.
Yeah, so Donny Deutsch, how do you report on this? It seems pretty obvious that when you have a guy that has called for the termination of the United States Constitution, called for it, the termination of the United States Constitution, you can't treat him like he's any other candidate. The New York Times can't treat him for, and Mika's right. Everybody's going to jail.
For him, in the name of him.
Around him, everybody's going to jail.
Insurrectionists.
So the question is, how do you just pretend that he's any other candidate?
You don't. You don't. And I think the thing that's hit me, the sound bites we see of Trump lately, he just seems tired and beat up. You know, he seems completely toothless and fangless. There's something beyond the fact that his act is old. He seems weathered. He seems beat up. He seems almost defeated, and the words are there. But if you kind of look at his mannerisms, or you look at his chest is not puffed out. He just feels like yesterday's tired, weakened news. So it's going to be interesting as he sticks his head further and further out how that plays out. But it's 4 years later. He's gone through January 6th. He's going through all these potential indictments. He just doesn't look like the same. Whether you loved him or hated him, he doesn't have that same strength, for lack of a better word. And Donald Trump without strength is nothing.
Yeah, there's this weird vibe around him. John Heilemann, there was this weird vibe around him the night he made his announcement that he was running for president again. His kids wouldn't show up. A weird vibe in that South Carolina event.
It's like they were looking at the audience and they were uncomfortable by what they saw. Maybe it was very small or I don't know what.
Well, I mean, Lindsey Graham looked like he was a hostage up there. The governor. Look at them. It's like a wake. It's just, again, everything, a political wake, everything seems strained and weak. I don't know. Maybe he pulls it off again. Right now, I don't see anybody beating him. But, my God, Donnie is right. He's lost more than a step.
I think that's right, and I think, Joe, I'm looking at looking at the way Republicans of an older vintage kind of look at Trump, and I saw a newsletter the other day. My friend John Ellis, a member of the Bush family, but who's also a long time was at Fox News for a long time, and an ally of Roger Ailes. Writes a very smart newsletter, and in this newsletter he talked about how the conventional wisdom is a lot of the things that we're all saying here about Trump. But he doesn't really disagree with that, but he kind of made a really astute point, which was about part of the way to take on Trump is you got to take him on if you're a Republican. You eventually have to go man to man against him. Eventually you have to get in the ring with him. You have to be able to beat him. You have to be able to stand up to the bully, all that stuff. But the thing that the Republican Party has been lacking, notably, substantively and thematically over the course of the whole Trump era, has been any sense of optimism, any sense of hope, any sense of those Reagan qualities, forward-looking, all of that stuff that has generally worked for both parties, whether it was Bill Clinton and Barack Obama or whether it was Ronald Reagan. The party has become so mired in grievance and anger that one of the ways maybe to try to take Trump on if you're a Republican is to sort of stand up and say, that gold watch thing. Yeah, Donald, once upon a time you talked about making America great again. Thank you for your service as president for one term. You helped us make America great again. If you're a Republican, you would say that. And then say, but you know what? He's not only just a loser, but he's become mired in backward-looking grievance and anger. That's not the way forward for this great party that once believed in the shining city on the hill, and try to go back to some of those kind of but what have been winning formulas for both parties in the past, becoming about the voters, about the future, about optimism, and try to break that cycle in the Republican Party, which has become so dark and so angry and so grievance-laden. Instead, Ron DeSantis is doing exactly the opposite thing, and I think that maybe my friend John Ellis may be right about that. That may be part of the way that a Republican, if they could find it in them, in addition to being able to punch the bully in the nose, is also to try to make that kind of contrast on optimism and the thematic and the substantive that could really set the person apart from the way the Republican Party has become under Trump's leadership.
So think about these Republicans bowing to Trump and not able to really stand up for themselves as they declare their potential runs for the presidency. This man, Donald Trump, is drowning in legal woes. Think about how if one of them goes badly for him, if he's indicted or arrested, these people will also be on the wrong side of history. And what are the chances that inciting an insurrection is a bad thing and that you might have a consequence for that? What are the chances taking classified documents and holding them, defying a subpoena and holding them at your club in Florida? What are the chances there's something illegal about that and there's something wrong with that and you might face consequences for that? Like, did these Republicans not see? Did they not hear that phone call he made to the Secretary of State? Yeah, get me 781 more votes. I just need a few more votes.
Well, they don't care.
I mean, there is possibly a consequence for that. And so you will be on the wrong side of history.
They don't care about that.
Well, maybe they'll care when it happens.
They haven't cared about that. They don't care about it now. I do, though, want to follow up on something very important, though, that John Heilemann said to Donnie Deutsch. And that is, it's about the future, man. Like, politics is about the future. Telling people what you're going to do to make their lives better. I know a lot of people that watch this show who are progressive probably hate Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan talked about the future. He always ended his speeches talking about, I truly believe that America's greatest days lie ahead. He was optimistic about immigrants. He said, bring them to America. When we stop bringing immigrants to America, then we stop being a vital nation and we die as a nation. There was, again, whether you agreed with Reagan or not, he had policies. You had think tanks, the Heritage Foundation, before it became this backward-looking America First isolationist reactionary thing that it is right now. You had all of these young people going there talking about a conservative future, what it might look like, what programs could be implemented. This Republican Party, Donald Trump's Republican Party, is so pessimistic. And I'm sorry to go on here, but I had a friend yesterday who worked for Reagan, that spent his whole adult life talking about Reagan. He's become a 2023 Trump conservative, so pessimistic. And I wrote him back yesterday, and I was like, dude, I'm sorry. You may have worked for the guy, but I'm still an optimistic conservative. I know, I guess I'm a man out of time, but maybe I'm 40 years late here, but you're negative about everything. You're rude about everybody. You insult the First Lady of the United States because she uses doctor, just like Dr. Henry Kissinger, just like Dr. Brzezinski. You're rude to these people. You're backward looking. You're saying that we should let the Russians overrun Ukraine and the rest of it's so negative. This is a recipe for continued losing. Like, they don't, John's so right. They don't talk about the future anymore. They talk about the past. They talk about resentment. And in Florida, they're talking about young girls' menstrual cycles. They are whacked out of their heads and have no future in American politics unless they change course.